Okay. Goes. Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Wukang Cook. Today we're doing a Korean dish called Gamja Jorim, which if you've had Korean barbecue before, you probably will most likely recognize it from one of the small dishes that you get before the meal, which you would typically call banchan, which is like small side dishes. So when you go to a Korean barbecue restaurant, in addition to the thing that you probably order, probably the first thing that will come out is a bunch of generally free, I guess you could call them free, or built into the price. It's probably the reason why Korean food is so expensive. Those small dishes, they usually include a number of things. One of those things, or they often will include things like kimchi or daikon, pickled radish, spinach, japchae, stuff like that. Little small dishes that you kind of munch on before you dive into the barbecue. Sometimes you even eat it with the barbecue. One of those small dishes is a potato dish called Gamja Jorim, which is a sweet glazed potato that comes up in a lot of Korean food. Yeah, senpai, how's it going? Yeah, Hermina, how's it going? Yeah, happy Monday. Happy Monday, everyone. So today we're going to be taking a shot at that dish. The reason that we came across this dish, actually it came across in a couple of contexts. But probably the main thing that I was wondering is I was watching the movie Stowaway, which features Daniel Dae Kim, who's basically an astronaut in space. And he's eating a bunch of space food with chopsticks, and it got me wondering what kind of space food would you eat with chopsticks, because that doesn't make any sense. Why would you bring chopsticks to space? So I kind of started brainstorming and probably tried to figure out what were the things that he would probably be eating. And I came up with this. So we're going to take a shot at it. If you've been following along not every Thursday, but many of the Thursday streams that we do, we cook through things that I take requests on over on the YouTube channel. So we'll take polls on the YouTube channel, and then I'll ask you to vote on the things in my refrigerator, and I'll make a recipe based off of the things that you guys pick. This was actually one of the earliest things that we did in that series, and we came up with something that kind of looked like Gamja Jorim, but it was mostly pretty off. I messed it up a little bit because I took a couple too many risks. So this is probably the third or fourth iteration of that recipe, which we did initially on live stream, and I came up with that recipe, kind of ad-libbed it. So that's what we're doing today. Yeah, how does the dish work? Yeah, so essentially what we're going to do is we're going to sear our potatoes, which I love doing in a wok. I love searing anything in a wok because it works really, really well, because it has a lot of even heating. So searing works really well because the wok is evenly heated all the way around. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull it out, and then we're going to do it in a long braise, kind of similar to how you would do it in a curry or anything that's long cooked. So if you do a Japanese curry, for example, it has potatoes in it, and then the thing that you end up with is the same texture as the type of potato that you would generally come across in a Japanese curry, for example, or any kind of potato that has been long cooked. So we're going to take a shot at that, and we're going to dive into all of those things in due time. Yeah. How many times have I cooked this before? Sad. Yeah, no worries. How many times have I cooked this before? So That's actually a good question. So we did it once on a live stream, like I was mentioning. And at that time, it did not look like anything that we were doing right now. I used a bunch of stuff that does not go in a Gamja Jorim because I was kind of improvising it and was mostly just trying to work in the things that people were asking me to use. I think I threw some cheese in there because people had asked me to use cheese, which is it's not that bad. It's just cheesy potatoes, but that's not what a Gamja Jorim is. And then we cooked it. I did it at least 2 more times off stream where I was writing the recipe. And now, as pretty much every Monday stream that you'll come across, it exists in a recipe video which lives over on the YouTube channel. So the last time that I cooked it was for that recipe video while I was trying to work out how to actually do a Gamja Jorim without getting it horribly wrong. So that always lives, just like anything that we cook on live stream, over on the YouTube channel. So if you haven't made your way over to the YouTube channel yet and you're looking for those recipes, they always live over there. So if you're watching on Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel that's at the bottom of the screen there. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel you're already on. You did it. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so what we just started off with, that was our crushed and minced garlic. This is 4 cloves of garlic. And this is about a tablespoon or about 1 inch's worth of finely minced ginger. We're going to throw this into our wok fry right before we start braising, and that's going to kind of bloom out these nice aromatic qualities that go into our braise. So you will very often see me starting off with those 2 ingredients because they work really well when we're working with umami flavors. Will work really well with that. Other than that, there are actually not very many ingredients, like actual food-based ingredients, other than the sauces that go into a Gamja Jorim. Really, the only other thing that we're going to be using is today we're going to be using some baby Dutch potatoes because they looked really good when I was at the market, so I picked them up. When I wrote the original recipe, I had done it with Yukon Golds. I'd done it with Yukon Golds initially, which also worked pretty well too. But I ended up going up with the Dutch babies today because they look cute, and I saw them at the market, so that's what we're doing. The other real great benefit to it, though, in addition to the fact that they look funny, is that they're already very bite-sized, so they work really well. But what we do want to be careful of, so you'll notice I've already started cutting them, is I just trimmed off all of the edges here, so we have this nice square and even piece of potato here. That's really important because if you don't trim those edges nicely, what you'll end up with is those edges, the small edges where it sort of tapers off. It will start burning, and then you're going to have burnt edges to your potatoes, which we don't want. So as we sort of chop these up, what we're going to do, not just chop them bite-sized, but we're also making sure that we clip off those little edges so that they don't burn. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Hello everyone. Cool. So I'm going to trim these up, and then we're going to get going. So the other thing that we want to remember anytime that we're working with any kind of potato, really, but this is actually more true with things like russet potatoes or really anything that oxidizes quickly, is that especially russet potatoes, they oxidize very quickly. So when we start chopping these up, you'll notice that I'm throwing them off to the side. They're going into a strainer here. What we want to do, and actually I'm going to do this right now, probably should have done it earlier, is I'm going to put this into a bowl of water. So this is super important because if you don't put them in water while you're working, over the course of the next 5 minutes, these will start oxidizing and they're going to turn pink. And then you're going to end up, but probably will still taste fine. It's just going to have a weird color to it. So it's going to be kind of pink. It might turn a little bit gray. All of those are things that they're probably going to be fine. It's going to taste fine, but if you want to protect the color of your potato, don't let that happen. So what we're doing over in the sink right now, I don't have the camera over there, but over in the sink, I just filled that bowl up with water, and that's just going to prevent those potatoes from oxidizing as we work. Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to go for maybe 2 cups of potatoes. I'm kind of eyeballing it, but it's also a little bit different with the Dutch babies, but yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah. So just like I mentioned before, we're trimming off these edges here so that we have a nice even piece of potato so that we don't end up with any kind of burnt edges. Yeah. Cool. Oh, you have gochujang kimchi and sweet potatoes at home. Yeah, that was actually the initial attempt that I tried. I used some gochujang, and it was really good, but that's not what a Gamja Jorim is. So the way that a Gamja Jorim works is it's essentially a long cooked potato in a savory sauce. So we're going to use a couple of things today. Mainly what we're going to be using is some dark soy sauce and fish sauce. I think those are probably the two ones that stand out to me. So we're gonna cook it in that braise for a long time. So that's gonna go for like probably almost 10 minutes maybe. And then at the very end, we're gonna throw in our sweet ingredients. So the sweet ingredients that I'm using today are gonna be honey and maple syrup. And I actually think that the maple syrup, that definitely is like an American thing. But I actually think it cuts the sweetness really well. And the original attempt that I had tried when I was doing it on live stream was using gochujang. And it works. It definitely works just fine because you're getting a lot of brightness and sweetness, and definitely a lot of heat from that gochujang. But that's not what a Gamja Jorim is. It's not supposed to be spicy or like hot like that. So yeah, if you have kimchi and you have gochujang, that's definitely something that I would probably attempt. But what I would say is instead of using that kimchi, I would say sub that kimchi out. And you just use the brine because the brine has a lot of fishy qualities to it. So instead of using fish sauce, you could use that kimchi brine, and you would get very, very similar qualities of umami because it has all of those fishy qualities to it. Yeah. Is there anything that you can save the trimmings for? Yeah. Usually what I do is I just eat them. Basically, I just eat them. So I'll finish cooking and then I'll serve the final dish up. And then I usually just throw it into the wok. They cook really, really fast because they're so thin. So they're little bits of, they're basically like tiny little French fries. So I usually just throw it back into the wok when I finish. And then I'll just cook them, throw a little bit of salt in it. Essentially what you end up with is a French fry. And they're really good because they're really crispy. And then they definitely will cook evenly too because all of your trimmings are essentially the same size too. So. I kind of went back and forth on like whether or not you really need to do the trim these edges off. I sort of landed on doing it just because I'm like get really frustrated when my potatoes don't cook evenly. But especially when you're searing, you definitely want to make sure that the edges don't burn because they will burn very, very easily in a wok fry. So I started doing this with almost every type of like home fries, and like any time that I use a potato, especially anything in a wok, I generally will trim those edges off. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, to answer your question, definitely just eat it. They're really good. Just eat it. It's just it's still potato. Yeah. Cool. So if we were using like a Yukon Gold or something, we would probably be a little bit more careful with how we slice these in half. The useful part about a Dutch baby is that they're already pretty bite-sized already, so we don't need to do too much. Some of these I'm not even going to trim because they're so small. And basically what we're doing is just chopping it in half and then trimming these edges off. And probably what I should do is wash them. I think I'm going to wash them. Yeah, do not try. Yeah, just eat it. Exactly, just eat it. It's literally just potatoes, so just go ahead and eat it. It's totally fine to eat it. The main reason why we're cutting it off is because it's not going to cook evenly. So we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to cook our potatoes. And then when you're done cooking them, just throw it in the wok and then cook it up, and it will be totally fine. I do it all the time with like home fries, and like when I'm making breakfast and stuff, I'll trim the edges off, and then I'll throw it back into the pan at the very end. And they cook super fast because they're tiny little pieces of potato, so it'll probably cook up in like, maybe it takes an extra 2 minutes or so, and then you'll end up with this nice, we call them like Scooby snacks. They're like chef snacks, like the things that you eat when at the end of the cook. So it's the little snack for the chef because they're like, they don't really end up on the table, but they're really tasty though. So that's probably what I'm going to do today. Yeah. Yeah. What's up with the tiny kitchen crepe in Japan? I'm not sure what you're referencing. the tiny kitchen crepe. That could be a lot of things. What camera am I using? Yeah, so I have a couple of cameras. You can see a couple of them behind me. So the one behind me, you could see him. One of them's on the stove. So that the one that's on the tripod, that's a Canon Vixia. So it's this one. I'll just change it for Reddit because that's the camera. So that's the Canon Vixia. It's on the stove, which is just like straight up just a camcorder. It's nothing fancy. You could get it for like $100 or something. And then the one that's it's on a suction cup mount and it's up on the hood of the stove. That's an iPhone, and it goes to YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, that's this camera. It's just a straight up iPhone 7, which is actually probably the nicest of all of the cameras because it's got an iPhone camera on it. And then over on the cutting board, so the one that everyone's watching right now, it goes to both the YouTube and the Reddit channels. That's a Canon T6, so that's a nice camera. That's probably the nicest one. It's the DSLR. You could see it in the face cam right there. And that's the one. That's the reason why we can do like crazy shit like zooming in and telescopic zooming and stuff like that. So that's really fun. Fun toys, but yeah. But definitely when I started streaming, I was literally just streaming from my phone. So yeah, cool. So that's our potatoes. Here's all of our scraps. I'm gonna set these scraps aside. And I'm gonna cook those up when we finish streaming. But over in our strainer, here's our finished potatoes. We have all of these nice evenly cut and evenly sized potatoes with very flat edges. So that's very, very useful. We have all of these flat sides, and that's what's gonna enable us to get a nice sear going. If we don't have those flat edges, you're gonna have a lot of trouble getting these things to sear because without those flat edges, you're not gonna have surface area to make contact with the wok. So. Yeah. Cool. So the last thing that I'm going to assemble here before we head over to the stove is our sauce ingredients. So what we're going to do is two different elements of sauce. So the first one we're going to set up is going to be off to the side in a separate bowl. We want to set our sweet glaze elements off to the side because they're going to get into the wok late, so towards the end. Because if we throw these glaze elements in too early, they're going to burn because they have so much sugar in them. So we don't want to dump our honey into the wok too early, otherwise they're going to start crystallizing and then we're going to have burnt honey, which is not good. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with our maple syrup here. So that's a tablespoon each of honey and maple syrup. And I'm pretty sure like a traditional Gamja Jorim just uses honey. Which you could totally do too. If you don't have maple syrup, you can totally just use honey. And it will work just fine. But I actually like using the maple syrup because it's not quite as sweet. So it kind of like dials back the sweetness of Gamja Jorim. And then next up in this bowl, we're going to throw in all of our savory ingredients, and they're going to cut through a lot of that sweetness. And then sort of like work in tangent against those really, really sweet flavors. Cool. So that's 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, 1 tablespoon of sesame oil. And then I think these are probably the 2 biggest ingredients that are really important. This is a tablespoon of dark soy sauce and a tablespoon of black vinegar. These are going to be where all of those like really deep and like malted sweetness flavors come from. And then finally, the last 2 things we're going to add here is a tablespoon of sake, which is just a little bit of brightness from the alcohol. And then last up is a tablespoon of fish sauce. So we're deriving sweetness from a number of places today. Probably the biggest elements of sweetness, those are coming from the use of our honey and maple syrup, but actually in this sauce is a couple of different sources of sweetness. Probably number 1 coming from that dark soy sauce, but also that black vinegar. That sake is going to have quite a bit of sweetness, and also that fish sauce is going to have quite a bit of sweetness. So all of those things are going to play in tangent and create this like interesting depth of flavor that's not just like really, really straight ahead. Yeah. Cool. Cool, so that's our sauce. Let's head over to the stove. I have my wok getting going here, and I'm going to reheat our wok here we're gonna get that going nice and hot, and we'll be ready to cook. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so I'm getting my wok heated up. Anytime that we're cooking in a wok, we want that thing ripping hot. So don't let anything into that wok before it's ripping hot, and that's to avoid any coming up with anything that's like mushy. So if we're trying to sear, this is actually true for anything that you're searing, not just in a wok. That sear or that wok needs to be ripping hot. So if you're doing a steak, for example, and you're doing it in a cast iron skillet, you're going to do the exact same thing. So that cast iron skillet, before that steak gets in the skillet, has to be very, very hot. Otherwise, you're going to end up with kind of a mushy steak. So same thing applies with our potatoes. We're going to heat that wok up and then put the potatoes in. So there's going to be cold potatoes going into a very, very hot wok with very, very hot oil in it. So what that means is before we start moving over to the wok and putting potatoes in it, we want to make sure that our potatoes are as dry as humanly possible for a couple of reasons. So probably the most important reason is that anytime that cold water makes contact with hot oil, you get splat, and that oil is going to start spitting, which is very dangerous. And you can definitely, and I definitely have, burned myself many times. So you want to make sure that if you're putting these potatoes into that wok when it has oil in it, these things need to be real dry. Otherwise, you're going to have some fun oil burns, which is how I have so many oil burns on my arms here. In addition to that, though, if you have too much water coating these potatoes still when they get into the wok, you're going to have a lot of trouble keeping that wok hot because there's too much water going on, and that water is going to start dropping the temperature of the wok. So as we put these potatoes into the wok, we want to try and get them as dry as possible, which of course is going to be a task to do and work around because we have had them soaking in water for a while. So we're trying to rinse out all of the water as much as possible as we can. Yeah. You see it well? Yeah, cool. Cool. All right, so before we start up, hello to everyone just tuning in. I see there's a lot of people watching today, which is cool. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. We're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out every Friday. What we're doing today is cooking through a recipe that I had put out over on the YouTube channel last Friday, so a couple of days ago, which is for a Gamja Jorim, which is a Korean braised potato that's glazed in honey, and we're going to use a little bit of maple syrup today. So if you're looking for the recipes for these, pretty much everything that we cook on stream, it has a recipe that goes with it. Those always live on the YouTube channel, so if you're trying to figure out how to cook the things that we're cooking, definitely check that out. This happens to be a recipe from a hack that I have been doing. I was watching the movie Stowaway, which features Daniel Dae Kim as an astronaut, and he was eating astronaut food with chopsticks, and I was trying to figure out probably what would be the thing that you eat in space with chopsticks, and this is what I came up with. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel and check out what's going on over there. Lots of fun new content popping up every Friday. So this last Friday was this Gamja Jorim. This Friday coming up is going to be a Japanese katsu donburi, which is a chicken katsu cutlet, like rice bowl. And then I forget what's coming after that. I think is, we're doing a fried rice after that. So lots of fun stuff. If you're looking for stuff like that, hop over to the YouTube. We're working our way up to 4,000 subs by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and subscribe. So for our sear, I'm getting our wok going. As you can see, it is very hot. And we have our peanut oil going into the wok. And then as always, anytime that we start cooking in a wok, we want to do our long yao, which is essentially coating that wok in that oil. And then we're going to add our potatoes. But I'm not going to dump my potatoes in all at once, because first of all, if we do that, it will definitely splatter and burn our hands. But more importantly, the reason that we're adding these in one at a time is because we want to make sure as much of these potatoes as possible is making surface area contact with the wok. So the more surface area that's in contact with the wok, the better our sear is going to be. So we'll have more, everything that is touching the bottom of the wok is going to sear. If it's not touching the wok, it's not going to sear. So I'm doing my very best to make sure that the flat side of the potatoes that we just finished cutting is facing downwards. That's going to give us the maximum amount of sear. And the more sear that we have, the more it will withstand the braise when we go into our long cook. So So if you have one, you can also do this in a cast iron pan. I would say it might even work a little bit better in a cast iron pan. But I love doing this in a wok because it has a lot of surface area. But more importantly, what I am doing is I'm actually going to stop a little bit early. So that was only about half of our potatoes. And the reason that I'm only adding half at a time is because we don't want to add everything to the wok all at once. Otherwise, you're going to start having trouble keeping that wok hot because there won't be enough heat in the range of our gas cook in order to keep the wok hot if there's too much stuff in it. So this is a problem that you will often run into if you're cooking on a home range, which is what we're doing today. Which is definitely a thing that most people who are cooking in restaurants are not running into because restaurant burners have a lot more heat than a home range does. So when we're wok cooking in a restaurant, so if you've ever watched someone cooking on a wok in a restaurant, they're cooking on much higher heat. So I recently looked this up because I looked into wok burners recently. Is a wok burner burns at, I think, close to like 54 to 200,000 BTUs, and a home range is closer to like 10,000 BTUs. Which means that we don't have nearly the same amount of heat as a wok burner does. So the way that we work around it is by adding things in batches. So we call this a batch cook. So as we cook in our wok, we're adding things and then we're going to remove it and then repeat with the next additional elements. So this batch cook is very important because it's going to help us keep that temperature of the wok very hot. So if we were cooking in a restaurant, for example, with really high heat, you wouldn't need to do this because the wok would be able to stay hot for a very long time. Today we do have to do that because we're cooking on a home range that's not going to get quite as hot. So lots of people think that this problem is the reason why you can't cook on a home range with a wok, which is absolutely not true. You can totally do it. You just have to approach the cook a little bit differently. 5,000 watching, but only 200 upvotes. Yeah, get in there. Definitely get in there. Cool. So I probably should have been keeping track of time, but I like to give our sear a full 2.5 minutes. I forgot to actually set a timer, so we're gonna have to check it. But what we're looking for here is some very dark browning, so this is not quite enough. If you're working like I am in a round bottom wok, you will probably run into the same problem that I'm running into, which is that when you work in a round bottom wok, it's very useful if you're trying to fry something because all of the oil pulls up at the bottom, so you can push stuff to that bottom and it fries a little bit faster because there's more oil down there. The other problem that you will run into, though, if you're trying to sear like we are right now, is that the oil is not going to evenly distribute because it's pulling up at the bottom. So in order to work around that, probably the best thing that you can do, or the easiest thing that you can do, use a flat bottom pan, use a flat bottom wok. If you don't have a flat bottom wok like me, just make sure that you rotate that oil so that it coats everything. And then, if you've done it correctly, you should have these nice brown potatoes. So, like so. Yeah. Yeah. Suja, oh, you came from YouTube. Yeah, cool. Thank you for hopping over to the YouTube. That reminds me, yeah, we also, in addition to the recipe videos, we also have a concurrent live stream that goes over on the YouTube. The mics are a little bit better, and also the cameras are a little bit better. So if you're watching, I've been told that if you're watching on Reddit and you have trouble pulling it up on desktop, it actually looks better on YouTube. But watch it wherever you want to watch it. I don't mind people watching on Reddit. That's cool. You can watch it on either platform. What brand is the wok? Yeah, so people ask about this wok all the time, and I wish I had a better answer. But I got this wok. It came from a restaurant supply store, and at the restaurant supply stores, they generally don't have brands on them because they're sold in bulk. So the wok doesn't have a brand. It's literally just a piece of carbon steel that was folded into the shape of a wok. It doesn't have any other branding on it other than that. So I have no idea. Okay, if you live in Oakland, I got it at Chenko, which is a restaurant supply store in Oakland, Chinatown. But yeah, I have no idea. But I also like to say is that I don't think that the brand of your wok is actually that important. I think actually what's a lot more important than the brand of the wok is actually the metal composition of the wok. So this wok, it's made out of carbon steel, and it has really nice heat retention qualities, or heat distribution qualities, excuse me. It has terrible heat retention. I also love a good cast iron wok if you have ever used a cast iron wok. Those are really useful too for cooking on electric top ranges because they have extremely high heat retention. Yeah. Cool. So that's our first batch. We could take a look here. So here's our finished first batch. And at this point, these are literally just home fried potatoes. So if you've ever made home fried potatoes for breakfast, that's basically what we just finished making. So we're gonna do these in 2 batches. So here's my second set. And just like my first batch, I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm placing these all face down. So we're making sure everything is facing down as they go in. And that's gonna help us get a nice sear going. Because the reason that helps get a nice sear going, I mentioned this earlier too, is because the more surface area that is in contact with the wok, the more area is it's going to sear. So anything that's not touching the wok, for example, so the sides that are not peeled, that's not going to sear. It's going to stay the exact same texture that it is. So if we're trying to maximize the crispiness of our Gamja Jorim, we want to get as much sear as possible in order for it to still be crispy. There we go. Cool. So that's our second batch. We're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to give that, and I'm actually going to time it this time, 2.5 minutes in the wok without moving it. So very, very important. If you're trying to sear something, the key to searing is stop touching it. It's very important. Don't touch it, don't move it, don't agitate it, don't do anything. Just leave it be. And the more that you mess around with it, the more that you touch it, the more that you're going to destroy or mess up that Maillard reaction, which is where browning comes from. So if you're trying to brown something, you got to leave it. Just leave it be, and it will crisp up. So in the meantime, we could take a look at our finished potatoes. So here's the ones that we got finished. So if we were eating these as home fried potatoes, you can see all of this nice browning going on right here. That's very, very important. So if we were eating these as home fried potatoes, they would be pretty crispy, but they're probably going to be a little bit raw. So they're probably going to be a little bit like crunchy in the way that like a raw potato is still a little bit crunchy. So that's like probably okay. But if it was up to me, and if I was trying to make hash like home fried potatoes to eat with like my scrambled eggs, I would want a little bit more cook through here. But the reason that we're pulling them out a little bit early is because we actually don't need them to be cooked all the way through. We're just trying to get a little bit of browning. And then the rest of that cook through is going to come from the long cook, which we're going to do after we finish browning. All right, so just like I mentioned earlier, I'm rotating my wok just a little bit to get that oil to move around a little bit more. Yeah. When I'm cooking in a wok, do I always want the oil to be smoky? Yeah, Matthew, good question. Yeah. So I generally so when I'm looking for like how hot is the wok, that can be kind of difficult to figure out if there's nothing in it, because if your wok is dirty, first of all, if your wok is dirty, it might start smoking because what's happening, the reason that it's smoking is because it's starting to burn whatever is left on the wok. So if you have a clean wok though, like a very, very clean wok with no residue on it, it actually should not smoke at all. It would just look like, you might not even be able to tell that it's hot because it would just look the same. The way that we tell that smoke is ready to cook on, that the oil is ready to cook on, is when you put that oil in. First thing that it should do is should start smoking up. And the second thing, if you're still not sure if it's ready to cook, stick a wooden utensil in it and you should see some bubbles coming up around that utensil. So you'll see like Chinese wok chefs do this. They'll stick like wooden chopsticks in, and basically what's happening is the wooden chopsticks are starting to sear. So that's a good sign. That means that you're ready to cook on. If you don't see that bubble and that smoke coming up, probably means the wok is not hot yet, hot enough yet. Yeah. A day without edging is a day without crispy wok seared potatoes. Yeah. Oh, you have a skillet. Yeah. Yeah. That's before I had this wok. I think I've had this wok for about 2 years now. Coming up on 2 years. This is not quite there yet. But before I had this wok, before I had this wok, I had a cast iron wok. But when I wasn't using that cast iron wok, I had a nice cast iron skillet, which is, you could do almost every wok cook can be done in a cast iron skillet, which does the exact same thing. It has all of the same heat retention properties. It's going to be a little bit harder to do tosses, so like things like this, That's going to be really hard to do in a cast iron skillet because a cast iron skillet is super heavy, but it will still cook in the same way. So it has this nice heat retention property to it. So you can still like get really, really high heat. It's going to still burn very, very hot. You're going to have a lot of heat quality, so you can still get like a nice crispy seared wok fry in a cast iron skillet. So if you don't own a wok or if you don't have space to store one, that's a good alternative. All right, so I just pulled out my second batch of potatoes. They kind of one or two of them burned a little bit, but that should be okay. So I'm pulling that out, and then we're going to add a little bit more oil. We don't want to add too much oil here because remember that our batch cook has introduced quite a bit of oil already. So that's maybe a single tablespoon of oil, and that's just enough to get our aromatics blooming. So here's my garlic going in, followed by my ginger. And then we're going to bloom these just long enough until they become fragrant. So start smelling at this point, use your nose. If you start smelling garlic and ginger, you should be ready to go. For me, that's usually about 10 seconds, but use your nose. So that's my garlic and ginger. And then we're adding our potatoes back. And then I'm just going to toss to combine a little bit so that garlic and ginger gets off of the bottom of the wok. That mostly will just help it keep it from burning. And then finally, we're going to add our sauce. And then lastly, the last thing that we're going to add here is a little bit of water. I usually go with this probably about a cup of water, maybe a little bit more than that. And essentially what we're looking for here is to coat or cover the potatoes in water here. So that everything needs to be underwater in order for it to braise. So the last thing that you just saw me do, so I just added my wok ring down here. That's what this is. And what that's doing is it's just keeping the wok from rolling around anymore. So before we had that wok ring, things were kind of rolling around because the bottom of the wok isn't flat. It's got a round circle to it. I like to have that wok ring off when I'm sauteing because I can kind of move the wok a little bit. But if you're worried about things spilling or knocking the wok off the stove, which I have done a lot of times, more times than I can count, at least a dozen times, make sure you get a wok ring, and that's just going to prevent it from falling off. So usually when you see me add a wok ring, it's probably when we're doing something where it has a lot of liquid. So if you've ever seen me deep fry something in this wok, it's probably got that wok ring down. And if you see me do things like curries or like anything that's stewing for a long time, anything that has a lot of liquid in it, where I'm probably worried that it's going to fall off the stove, that's probably why I added the wok ring. Oh yeah, what is the sauce? Yeah, so we did the sauce. That was on the first half of the stream. What we did was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, a tablespoon of dark soy sauce. That's where all of that color comes from. Also, there was a tablespoon of black vinegar, and then a tablespoon of fish sauce, sesame oil, and sake. And there was supposed to be a little bit of sugar in there, but I forgot. And then the last 2 things that we have not yet added is a tablespoon each of maple syrup and honey. We held those 2 elements back because they have a lot of sugar in it. And if we add those things right now, they will start crystallizing and it's essentially just going to burn. So we want to hold those sweeter elements back until probably close to like the last maybe 5 minutes or so. And that's going to give us the sweet glazed qualities to our potatoes here. In the meantime, though, this is going to go for maybe about 5 minutes, maybe 5-6 minutes. Where can you get the wok ring? Yeah, so I got the wok ring in the same place where I got the wok. So generally, if you find somewhere that sells a round bottom wok, there should also be wok rings sold next to it. Because if you're selling a round bottom wok, you should probably go, if you buy a round bottom wok, you should also probably leave the store with a wok ring. Otherwise, you won't be able to do like half of the things that you can do in a wok, which is basically anything that has like liquid, anything that needs braising, essentially. So if you find yourself a round bottom wok, which is sometimes hard to do, but if you find yourself a round bottom wok, there should be somewhere around it a wok ring too. And definitely, if you walk out of a store carrying a round bottom wok, you should also have in your hand a wok ring too, which I forgot the first time that I did it. So very important. Yeah. Yeah, the wok ring. Yeah, that's the most important part. So yeah, definitely if you've seen me doing things like tempura fried chicken or like General Tso's chicken, any kind of fried things. We did a chicken katsu recently. Anything that's like has like a vat of oil in it. So for deep frying, for example, you will always see me put that wok ring down, and it is almost purely out of security. So what you really, really, really never want to happen is drop 12 ounces of searing hot oil on the ground. Because it will burn and you will have a real bad time. You're gonna have a real bad time if that falls off the stove. So if you drop a round bottom wok and it's filled with food, it's gonna suck because you're gonna lose the whole meal. It's gonna end up on the kitchen floor, but you're not gonna hurt yourself. It's gonna be fine. I've done it many times, more times than I'd like to admit. I've even done it on stream before, I think, where essentially the wok falls off the bottom of the stove. But if you do that and it has fryer oil in it, you could give yourself some very serious burns. So anytime that you see me deep frying, that wok ring is probably down too, just to make sure that thing doesn't freaking fall off the stove, which sucks. So the wok ring may be the first investment that you're wiping. Yeah, it's real important. Yeah, if you're doing any kind of curry or any kind of like long cook in that wok, it's real important to have that ring. Otherwise, you're gonna run into a lot of safety issues. All right, so I'm also agitating these potatoes a little bit just to make sure that, because they are technically still making contact with the bottom of the wok, and just making sure that nothing's burning. But as the water starts boiling down, you may run into a problem where it's not quite covering all of the potatoes anymore. So if you need to, so you can still add a little bit of water if it's reducing faster than it's cooking. So we're keeping an eye on a couple of things. The number one thing is where the water line of our potatoes are. We want to make sure that the liquid is still covering the potatoes. But the other thing that we're paying attention to is the tenderness of the potatoes. So we want those to be relatively fork tender here, kind of like the texture of the potato that we're looking for when we do things like Japanese curry, stuff like that. We want those to be pretty fork tender, not quite mushy. We don't want like mashed potatoes here, but we do want fork tender. Otherwise, it's going to be like more crunchy than it's supposed to be. And the other important thing is that the better that you do that sear, so the more sear and crisp qualities that you get from that sear, the better that the final potato is going to be. So it should be fork tender and like very toothsome, but also like have a nice crisp quality to it that should be retained from that sear. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. What is the sauce? Yeah. So I also mentioned. So I mentioned it earlier, and I'll run through it again. But if you're looking for all of the ingredients, that always lives over on the recipe. So that lives here. Which lives over on the YouTube channel. So if you're looking for that recipe, there's always a written version that lives over on the YouTube recipe or YouTube video. We also like kind of talk through some of those ingredients a little bit more. So I'll like in those recipe videos, I'll generally talk a little bit slower. I definitely tangent a lot less because I'm not answering questions. But we'll definitely I'll talk through some of the ingredients. I'll also talk through some of the brands of the ingredients that we're using, and sort of like what's the difference between like a Lee Kim-ki dark soy sauce versus like a Kunchan dark soy sauce, things like that. So like all of these different sauces, they have like different flavors, different textures depending on the brand. So all of those things, they also live over on the YouTube videos. So that's worth checking out if you're trying to like reproduce the things that we're using. But in the sauce, that was soy sauce, dark soy sauce, honey, maple syrup, black vinegar, and fish sauce, and a little bit of sesame oil. Where's the dashi? Yeah, that might have been good too. Yeah, I might have worked with a little bit of dashi. What I actually did, so what dashi is derived from kombu, which is I guess like a kind of like a sea kelp. What you get out of dashi is a lot of like fishy flavors, so like a fishy brightness to it, like almost like a lot. I guess like the best way to put it is, so like the origin of MSG, which is where like all of the umami comes from in Chinese food. It comes from dashi. It comes from kombu, which is where dashi comes from. So all of those qualities of umami, they come from the same place. So today we actually didn't use dashi because I don't have any left. But what I substituted that with was a little bit of fish sauce, which is going to be kind of like the same vein of like types of umami. So it's going to be the same kind of like fishy, seafoody quality of umami. So if you don't have either of those things, the next best thing I always recommend is using oyster sauce. That definitely comes from a different cuisine. Oyster sauce comes from Chinese cuisine, but it will have the same qualities of like fishiness to it. And if you don't have any of those things, the last thing that I'll recommend is using a little bit of anchovy, which just comes from American cooking. But like I always recommend, anytime that you're cooking, use what you have. This is what I have, so. Yeah. It's time to harass the potatoes again. Yeah, it probably is. So you'll notice I just added a little bit of water, and you'll notice that the reason that I added a little bit of water is because a lot of these potatoes are not submerged anymore, which means that they're not braising properly. So I'm adding a little bit more water back. I also turned down the fire, which I don't think we needed to do. And I'm just adding enough water to make sure that these potatoes stay submerged so that we get that nice braise going. Yeah. Bad stream for dieting. Yeah, it is a real bad stream for dieting. Yeah. MSGs, yeah, lots of people ask me about MSG. The reason that I don't use MSG very often is because a lot of the things that I use in those sauces already contain MSG. So if you're not familiar, MSG is like a powdered substance. It's the thing that is in all Chinese food, so you can't make Chinese food without MSG. You can find it these days. You can find it as like a powdered substance. So it kind of looks like, actually looks a little bit like cocaine. But probably more colloquially, you'll recognize it looks a little bit like salt. And you can take pinches of it and you can just sprinkle it on top of stuff. It's a real easy way to get a little bit of extra umami boost because it's just like throwing salt on it, and you can throw a little bit of MSG on it instead. The reason that I don't use MSG very often is because a lot of the things that we're using already contain quite a bit of MSG, either naturally occurring or it might just be an additive. So a lot of the things that we use today, that dark soy sauce or soy sauce, the dark vinegar and the fish sauce, all of those already contain quite a bit of MSG. So there's no real reason to add more MSG to it. Although I do agree is that you can't make most Asian food in general, but definitely Chinese food, probably Korean food for sure too. But mostly anything that is like savory umami can't really be done without MSG. And whether or not you're adding it independently could be debated, but it's got to come from somewhere because that's where the umami is going to come from. So if you're not using either MSG or something that contains MSG, it's not going to taste right. And if you've ever had Chinese food that doesn't contain MSG, you'll know what's wrong. That's what's wrong. Also, if you've ever been to a Chinese restaurant and it says that they don't use MSG, they're probably lying. That's probably a lie because it's not possible to make Chinese food without MSG. They're probably like say they don't use MSG, they don't use it like an additive like I do. But some in their recipes they've got some MSG. Otherwise, if you eat at a restaurant that doesn't contain MSG and it doesn't taste weird, they're probably lying. Yeah. Bam, yeah. Cool, yeah. So that's our potatoes. We're finally gonna add, so we're right about like 5 minutes before these are gonna be done. I'm gonna add my honey and maple syrup here. So this is about a tablespoon each of honey and maple syrup. And again, the reason that we were holding this back is because we don't want the sugars in these two elements to start crystallizing and cooking. So we don't want them to burn. So there's our sweet elements. And then we're going to toss these together. And that's going to be where all of the glaze qualities of our potatoes come from today. Yeah. Oh, is it in the any ingredients used? Yeah, today it's in the soy sauce, the dark soy sauce, the fish sauce. Yeah, that's probably it. Soy sauce, dark soy sauce, and the fish sauce probably all contain MSG. They definitely contain MSG, actually. I take that back. Yeah. But yeah, if you're looking for like more umami, you could definitely use a little bit of dashi broth. That could work too. I just don't have any left, so. Ketchup is white person MSG. Yeah, that's basically it. That's actually, what I think is that ketchup, hoisin sauce is the ketchup of like Chinese food because it's like lots of. When I was a kid, I used to use hoisin sauce ketchup. I would put it on like eggs and stuff. It's basically ketchup. It's essentially what it is, ketchup. Ketchup tastes like sad. Yeah. I mean, that's an opinion. Cool. You just recently found that ketchup is very high in sugar, for sure, yeah. But that's also what makes it such a good ingredient, so I use it a lot. I use it actually a lot in a lot of things that are like origins from like expat World War II stuff. So actually the thing that I used it recently in was a katsu donburi, or a chicken katsu sauce, so a katsu sauce. and there's no other way around it. The only way to make a katsu sauce, which comes from Japanese cooking, is using ketchup, because that's where like that kind of like tinny like bottle of tonkatsu sauce comes from. It's coming from the ketchup. And actually, what I found out when I was researching this is that it comes from that ketchup because katsu sauce is derived from the expats in Japan post World War II, and like creating those elements of cuisine in Japan. So it's actually it sounds kind of weird, but it actually has like legitimate like cultural influences. It actually belongs in some of those dishes. It's not an Americanized thing. That's a real thing. There's sugar in almost anything. Yeah, that's true. Cool, so this is about like maybe 2 minutes from done. Before we finish up, my name is Wesley, this is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, with new recipes out over on the YouTube channel every Friday. So if you haven't hopped over to the YouTube channel yet and checked out some of those recipes, they all live over there, which if you're watching on Reddit, it's the channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel you're already on here there. Over on that channel, that's where all of the recipe videos live, so if you're trying to recreate the things that I'm cooking, that's a good place to be because it will move a little bit slower. Those recipe videos are pretty useful if you're trying to like recreate some of these things. That also has a written recipe, so if you're trying to follow along and keep up with things that I'm cooking, it's probably a little bit easier to bookmark than these live streams. So that always lives over on the YouTube channel. The recipe that we're cooking through today is for a Gamja Jorim, which is a Korean banchan dish, like a side dish. And it's inspired by, I was watching a movie featuring Daniel Dae Kim, which is called Stowaway. It's out on Netflix. And he was eating something out of a space bag. He was an astronaut and he was eating something out of a spaceman bag. And it got me thinking, like, because he was eating it with chopsticks, so I was kind of wondering, like, what do you eat in space with chopsticks? And this is what I came up with, so this is what we're cooking. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to the YouTube. We're working our way to 4,000 subs by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and subscribe. We're nearly there. I think we're at like 37, 38, something, 37 something, I forget. But we're coming close, so if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over, give it a subscribe. Cool. So our potatoes are pretty much there. At this point, I'm just going to wait for the liquid elements of our braise to tighten up a bit. So I'm going to stop adding water at this point. And we're going to let the liquid in our braise kind of tighten up, and that's going to reduce quite a bit. So I'm going to turn the we're going to let that reduce. That will go for maybe another minute, maybe 2 minutes. And then once that liquid reduces a little bit, we'll pull it out. And that's going to be our finished Gamja Jorim. Ooh, Chef Dot, yeah. Something with a wok ring, yeah. RKK6, yeah, how's it going? Hello to everyone. Hello, everyone. Are they ready yet? They're almost ready. Probably another like minute, and then we'll be ready. Right now, what we're doing is just reducing some of this liquid, and then we'll be there. But definitely we can pick out a fork. What we're looking for is fork tender, so when we use a fork, this should, fingers crossed, pierce the potato, like so. If you can't do that with your potato, they're probably not done yet. Ow. So the last thing that we're doing is just kind of reducing some of that water. Also, I just burned the crap out of my hand. Whoops. Yeah. How do you know what temperature to cook at? Yeah, so if you're cooking in a wok, it really only goes at one temperature, and that's hot. The wok only runs at one temperature. When you start like long cooking, like we're doing here, you can kind of let it simmer, so you could turn the fire down to medium or so. And that's really the only reason that you turn that fire down on a long cook like this, is just to let the water sort of like stop reducing quite as much. So I noticed that my braise was reducing a little bit faster than I'd like it, so I had turned it down to medium. But otherwise, anytime that you're cooking in a wok, it really only exists on one temperature, and that temperature is hot. It should always be hot. If it's not at like the hottest that it possibly can get, you're gonna start running into issues where you get like very like mushy stir fries. So if you've ever had a stir fry that kind of has like the texture of like oatmeal or like porridge or like old cereal kind of, it's kind of like mushy. That's coming from the fact that your wok isn't burning hot enough. So it's the same reason why lots of people think that you can't cook on a wok at home. which is not true. It just means that the wok wasn't hot enough, so you got to keep that wok very, very hot. So if you're stir frying, the wok should be hot at all times. So otherwise, when I'm not long cooking like we are right now, you will never ever see me turning the fire down. It's pretty much just going to be hot the whole time. Yeah, this is nearly there. Midnight Diner. I have not watched Midnight Diner. That sounds interesting. Ooh, Thug Dong. Yeah, have I been to Ogane? Yeah, that's what I've been going to Ogane since I was like in college, probably like 10 years. They did some renovations recently, I think within the last like 5 years. And they like built an entire different side of the restaurant. But back when I first started going, that was back in like 2008 or so. The restaurant was literally just tables with fans on it, which is meant for what do they call that? In Japanese, you call it shabu shabu, which is like hot pot with a grill at the table. I forget what you call it in Korean. Shabu shabu, maybe? I forget. Anyway, it's basically it's grilling meat at the table, which meant like anytime that you go to Agane, you're gonna leave smelling like meat, because even if you're not grilling meat at the table, you're gonna have everyone around you is grilling meat at the table. So that's been my experience, or my like association every time that I go to Agane, is that I'm gonna leave smelling like steak. Cool, so I'm pulling my wok ring out. We're just about done, so we probably don't even need it anymore. Yeah, it should do it. All right. So you can see it here without the wok ring. You'll notice that the wok is rolling around quite a bit. So all of that, I like my wok to do this when I'm stir frying, because it means that I can toss a little bit better. So we can do stuff like that. That works a little bit better without that wok ring. But if it was doing this and I still had like 3 cups of water in the wok, I would be very worried about this happening and like the wok rolling right off the stove, which is not going to be fun. All right, so last up, the last thing that we want to do anytime that we're cooking in a wok, and you'll hear me say this at the end of literally every stream now, is you want to rinse the wok out. While the wok is hot, give that wok a rinse, especially with carbon steel woks. While it's hot, it has this non-stick surface going on, which means that when you rinse it, pretty much everything comes off. So I didn't do anything. All I just did was give it a quick rinse, and everything just rinsed right off, kind of like a Teflon pan would do. This is super important, and do yourself a favor and make sure to clean your wok while it's hot, because if you were to try and do that while it's cold, all of that honey is going to start sticking. You're going to have crystallized sugar stuck to the wok, which is not going to be fun. You're going to have to start scrubbing. All that stuff is going to be a real pain in the ass to clean. So I'm cleaning it while it's hot, and everything just comes right off. And that's it. Do I ever pour the boiling wok oil into my thighs? Yes, I have absolutely done that. If you're wondering, have I ever done anything involving spilling the wok oil on anything? Probably done it. I've done it every way that you can injure yourself with a wok. I've pretty much done it, and it sucks. They're all things that you don't want to do. Trust me, they're not fun. All right. So I'm finishing this off. This is a pinch of sesame seeds. That's kind of optional. Probably you wouldn't see that happen in a Korean restaurant, because sesame seeds are expensive, but I think it looks nice. All right. Cool, there it is. Simon, you started watching the videos I posted on the recipe. Oh, and I use larger potato chunks. Yeah, good question. Yeah, so in the original recipe, so if you went over to YouTube and found the original recipe, in the original recipe, I actually have some left over. I was using Yukon Golds, which look like this. Pull this back up. They look like this. It's still pretty small, so this is a relatively small potato still. What we use today is a Dutch baby potato. Which is very, very similar. It has a similar kind of texture to the skin. Really what we're looking for when we're trying to figure out what I was looking for when I was trying to figure out what kind of, I guess the real answer is you could do this with any kind of potato you want. I did it with Idaho russets at one point and it worked fine. But what I was looking for when I started doing this particular version of this recipe is the skin. So I was trying to keep that skin intact because it has a nice crisp quality when it comes out of the braise. So it's still very, very chewy. So with a with a Yukon Gold potato like this one, it has the skin over the top, which we didn't peel, so it just stayed right on. And then when we seared it, it got this nice crisp quality to it, like kind of like French fry has when it has the skin on still. It's got the nice crisp quality to it, where like the potato skin itself gets nice and crispy and like tooth tender. Dutch baby has the same quality, has the same type of skin. It's just a little bit smaller. So same concept. The only reason that I was using Dutch babies today is because I saw it at the grocery store and it looked really good. So, but you could use whatever kind of potato that you want. You don't have to have the skin, although I do recommend that it tastes real good. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Let's try these out. Yeah, super tasty. This is one of my favorites. This is my favorite banchan dish, probably next to the kimchi. Like very, very interesting, like not too sweet, which is probably like my #1 problem with a lot of Gamja Jorim is that it's really, really sweet because it has a lot of like sugar, like honey in it. So the maple syrup, it cuts that sweetness a lot because it's not quite as sweet and sugary as maple syrup. So that's nice because it's not like overwhelmingly sweet, but it's also not overwhelmingly savory. It kind of like balances itself out nicely. And then the potatoes themselves are real tender, real fork tender the way that we were looking, but the skin that's still intact is still very toothsome, and we have that nice crisp quality from the sear too. Yeah, please eat more. Yeah, cool. Yeah, one of my favorites, solely, yeah. So, if you give this one a shot, it's a super fun recipe. Real easy one to throw together too if you're trying to like cook for a bunch of people. You could probably do a whole bunch of these, especially if you have like multiple woks. You could do like a couple pounds of potatoes all at once. It would be real easy to do. Yeah. Cool, wow, lots of questions. When is or isn't it necessary to blanch potatoes? Yeah, so it depends. So it really depends. I have never needed to blanch a potato. So the reason that we blanch, and I usually will do a blanch with anything that is like very, very delicate. So I do it with a lot of fresh pasta. I did it recently. I was doing a kimbap, which is like basically like Korean sushi, and I was blanching spinach. Which is very, very delicate. So the reason that we blanch is because we need to stop the cooking process or it will overcook. So very often if you see something that has a very short cooking time, so for example, when you're trying to like wilt spinach in like boiled water, that only takes like 15 seconds, maybe a little less than that. Which means that once you pull it out of the water, there's going to be more cooking happening than is necessary. So it will absolutely overcook when it comes out of that water. So the reason that we blanch is to stop that cooking time. With a potato, I've never really needed to blanch a potato because carryover time on a potato is fine because you can, first of all, you can generally account for carryover time on a potato because like you just saw, we cooked that potato for like 10-15 minutes, which means that if it has a little bit of carryover time, all you really need to do is turn the stove off at like an extra like 3 or 4 minutes early, which I did. So I pulled it off right before it was like a little bit fork tender, but not quite completely fork tender. And that just accounts for the carryover time that's going to happen while it's off heat. With other things, so like fresh pasta, for example, there's not really an opportunity for that to carry over because the cook time is so small. The window of time where it's good is really, really small. So it's like within 30 seconds. If you go past, so if you cook fresh pasta for 2 minutes, it's perfect. If you go to 3 minutes, it's probably overcooked, which means that if it has carryover cook, it's probably gonna cook if you don't do it properly. So that's really the only time that I introduce a blanch. Yeah. Cool. What do I do for? I do a lot of things for a living. Yeah, so lots of people ask that. I used to play music for a living, so I used to play in a band called Trace Repeat. We were playing, like touring around California, pretty much every weekend. And during COVID, we stopped doing that obviously because we couldn't play music live anymore. So I started this YouTube channel, and now I do this for a living actually. I operate a virtual kitchen under Woo Can Cook. And we just started a vendor booth, so it's going to start showing up. So if you happen to live in the Bay Area, keep an eye out for the Woo Can Cook vendor booth, and we're going to start cooking fried rice. And that will start appearing all over the Bay Area, hopefully. Oh, Thugdung, yeah, what kind of, yeah, totally. So if you're looking for it, you can always find the ingredients. They live on the recipe here. What we used today were Dutch baby potatoes, which are really small potatoes. They're like that big. What I used in the recipe itself was Yukon Gold potatoes, which I'm not actually sure if those are the same type of potatoes. I feel like they might be the same type of potatoes. The only difference is that a Dutch baby potato, or Dutch baby is like really, really small. It's like bite-sized, whereas a Yukon Gold is like a little bit larger. It kind of looks like this. So it's a little bit larger, like this size. And that's what we used in the recipe video. So the only real difference is that in the recipe video, I had to do a little bit more chopping to get everything like nice and bite-sized. And the only real reason why I used Dutch babies today is because they would look really cute when I bought them in the grocery store. That's oftentimes how I'll base recipes, is just like what looks fresh. So, oh, come to the North Bay. Yeah, definitely. We'll be in the North Bay soon. Let's see. We're doing the Alameda Antiques Fair is going to be first Sunday of the month. That's where we're going to start. And then yeah, definitely we'll get in the North Bay pretty soon. I was born and raised in Marin County actually, so if you're in the North Bay. Cool. I think that's it, everyone. Let me know if I missed anything. I know I miss questions all the time, especially when there's so many people watching. I definitely miss stuff that happens in the chat a lot. So feel free and repeat yourself. If I missed anything, feel free and repeat yourself. I'll be here doing dishes, and I hopefully can still answer stuff in the chat if I did miss anything. What else? If you haven't yet, please do hop over to the YouTube channel and check out what's going on over there. We have new recipes coming out every Friday. That's also where the live stream schedule lives. So if you're trying to figure out what I'm going to be cooking next, that always lives over on the YouTube channel. So I think that schedule goes out almost 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks now. It also has the schedule of like when the next recipe videos are going to come out. So sometimes I don't even remember what that schedule is. I know that this Friday coming up is going to be Japanese katsu donburi, and then the Friday after that is going to be Chinese lapchung fried rice, and then I forget what we're doing after that. I think we're doing sesame rice balls. But yeah, definitely if you're trying to figure out what we're going to be cooking next, that always lives over on the YouTube channel, and the YouTube channel probably has more information and knowledge than I actually remember. So that's a fun place to be if you're looking for new content. Those are coming out every Friday if you're trying to find that stuff. And then other than that, if you're first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. So yeah. How do you cook tofu? Any shows on the? Yeah, MTJ. Yeah, I've done a bunch of stuff on tofu. It depends on what kind of tofu. I have kind of shied away from recipes that treat tofu like meat, which is really, really frustrating because tofu isn't meat and it will never taste like meat. And I don't like vegetarian recipes that try to get tofu to taste like meat because for a couple of reasons. Number one, because they're generally pretty bland. But number two is because it's misusing tofu. That's not how tofu is meant to work. So because of that, I kind of stopped working with firm tofu. But so my favorites right now are the mapo tofu recipe over on the YouTube channel. It's probably my number one favorite. And what it does is it uses a very, very soft type of tofu, which has no qualities about it that are similar to meat. Soft tofu is really delicate, so you could like crunch it by like poking it, or like crumble it by poking it. And what you do is you just add it very, very late. So it's like the last thing that goes into the wok fry in the last 30 seconds or so. And that just keeps that really delicate quality to it. and then you have this like really delicate kind of like silky quality tofu that maybe necessarily doesn't taste like anything independently because it's tofu. It's not going to taste like anything, but it's covered in a lot of things that do taste like things. So in a mapo tofu has a very savory and spicy flavor to it. So it's got like a lot of Szechuan peppercorn and stuff. So the dish itself is very flavorful, and it has this really beautiful quality to that silk tofu that's really lovely. And that's my favorite way of cooking tofu. Is just stop treating it like meat. Everyone needs to stop treating tofu like meat, because it's never going to taste like meat. And the more that you try and make tofu taste like meat, the more that people are going to start hating tofu. It's dumb. Cool. All right, I think that's it, everyone. Let me know if you have any other questions. We're working our way to 4,000 subs by the end of the month over on YouTube too. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and give us a subscribe. I think we're coming pretty close. So, cool. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you soon.
You're as sweet as strawberry wine. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. Darling, I'll stay stoned on your love all the time.
coming out of left field. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Got another mouth to feed. Leave it with the babysitter, mama call the grave digger. Gone with the falling leaves. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might have had your fill, I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, I can feel it still. We can fight a war for peace. Give in to that easy living. Goodbye to my hopes and dreams. Stop flipping for my enemies. We could wait until the walls come down. It's time to give a little to the kids in the middle, but oh, until it falls, won't bother me. I'm a rebel just for kicks. Yeah, your lovers in a bitch for my heart to eclipse. Might be over now, but I feel it still. I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Might have had your fill, I can feel it still.
The club isn't the best place to find a lover, so the bar is where I go. Me and my friends sat at the table doing shots, drinking fast, and then we talk slow. If you come over and start up a conversation with just me, then trust me, I'll give it a chance. Now take my hand, stop, put Ben the man on the jukebox, and then we start to dance. Now I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me, said boy. Let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. And last night you were in my room. And now my bed sheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you. One weekend we let the story begin. We're going out on our first date. You and me are thrifty, so go all you can eat. Fill up your bag and I fill up a plate. We talk for hours and hours about the sweet and the sour and how your family is doing okay. We'll even get in a taxi. We'll kiss in the backseat. Tell the driver make the radio play. Now I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me, said boy. Let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. And last night you were in my room. And now my bed sheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, my baby, come on. Come on, be 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 my baby, come on.